So hello everyone and welcome from me as well. My name is Nathalie Lang and I will quickly introduce my tandem partner Orly Zimmerman and our project. So our general topic is the archive and its role and impact on a shared heritage. We then, after talking a bit about the big topic of the archive, already split up into two different groups or two different levels. I focused on the macro level by looking at the archive as an institution and how it shares heritage, with the example of the Global Archives project initiated by the German Literature Archive in Marbach. Researcher Dr. Caroline Jessen, who was part of the project, visited us virtually last summer to talk a bit about the project and about archive in general. And the project focuses on the digitization and international collaborative research on German Jewish archive material. And Orly dived deeper into the micro level of the archive by researching a specific person and her estate. She did a case study of a private collection from the Israel Museum by German-born Israeli photographer Liselotte Grschebina. And with that, I'm already passing on to you, Orly, to tell us a bit about your case study and welcome our guest, Dr. Noam Gal.
My case study, as Natalie said, was about Liselotte Grschebina, who is a German-born photographer who studied and worked in Germany, and then in 1934 came to Israel to work here. I would like first to introduce Dr. Noam Gal, who was if I assume the last 7 years, the curator of the photograph department in the Israel Museum. And we had in our case study a very interesting interview, which I ask you some question, and I would like to talk about it a little bit again. I would like to ask you what is the role of the archive, in a private collection in particular, in transmission of cultural heritage and the reconfiguration of cultural narratives.
Thank you, Orly, and thank you, Natalie. Yes, I'll just talk very briefly about, first of all, maybe you already heard it, the story of how the Liselotte Grschebina collection came to the Israel Museum in the year 2000 with basically its entire estate, which means not only photographs, but also all sorts of letters and paperwork and other working materials. It's been exhibited once as a kind of medium-sized solo show, mostly of its kind of historical photography. And then some of its works were incorporated in other exhibitions at the museum, most recently in the collection exhibition, A Modern Love, which highlighted the masterpieces of modernist photography from the Israel Museum. And Grschebina was given a room for her own work in that exhibition. You know, it was one of those historical exhibitions that starts at some point very early in the Van de Siècle, in the turn from the 19th century to the 20th century, with the growing recognition of photography as an independent art medium. So we talk about pictorialism in photography, if you heard the term, with figures like Alfred Stieglitz and Edward Steichen and Gertrude Kaiserbill, and moving to newer or later waves and traditions, of course, namely Dada and Neue Sachlichkeit, and with great names like Man Ray and Dora Maar and other great photographers that can be exhibited in many other museums. But then the idea to dedicate a room to Liselotte Grschebina is basically the idea to kind of recalibrate this canon and to integrate into this canon names that were not known before. So Liselotte Grschebina is now, I think, kind of is attractive to museums, not only in Israel, but also worldwide, at least for two reasons. One is for the reason of, as was mentioned earlier in the context of architecture, bringing, let's say, modernist or even European tradition into the Zionist context, namely after 1934 when she opened in Tel Aviv her Ishon studio with Ellen Auerbach, only for 2 years, but still it was very, very active, and Ellen Auerbach already with her brought a very strong eye and very strong sensibilities from the Ringel and Pitt duo. But this is only one reason why Grschebina's work is so sought after. Recently, when I say recently, I mean really in the last 5-6 years. Yeah, new attraction, a new wave of going back to the canon of art history, specifically modern art history, specifically the art of the 20th century, and kind of looking for women there and highlighting the role of women artists in that history. And in many cases, we talk about super active and super influential women artists that were just not known into this, not introduced into those canons. But more broadly to Orly's question, I think that really doing the research, maybe sometimes the hunt for new collections or for collections that were unknown before, for estates, for names of artists that were less known, and to seek after the work is only really one task of the museum or of a collecting art institution. Not every art institution is occupied with collecting and with maintaining great collections. In Israel, the Israel Museum is the largest collecting institution, art institution, and this is an important task, but it's I feel that it's not the most important task of a museum that has archives. I think that at least two other tasks are just no less important, and I would like just to very briefly mention them. One is, of course, how to display these collections, what context the museum gives these collections when they reach the moment of exhibition. But another task that I find no less important for the museum is also to somehow not only conserve and maintain the collections, but also to maintain the critical gaze at the collection or at the archive. How do we maintain the ways in which many people, artists included, look at the archive? How do we conserve the way people react to it or interpret it? How do we maintain these angles, these perspectives? And this is really, I believe, the task of actually artists. There is a whole range of archive art that, as much as I appreciate archive art, I am always a little bit worried that at some cases archive art internalize the power of archives within the art itself and adapts some sort of the power relations between archive and people, and sometimes the violence that is embedded within the power of archives and how it limits access into the artwork itself. So I just encourage you also to be critical of that as well. Thank you. That's all for now.